everyone. Hey, all you beautiful Ethicuties. Welcome to the coolest place to be every Tuesday at noon Eastern. If you think fixing our workplaces and healthcare can fix our world, we got a real treat for you today. We're going to be talking about the 2025 Ethico Healthcare Hotline and Investigation Benchmark Report. We have a ton of takeaways for you, and we have an amazing guest, well, two amazing guests, Gio Gallo and Leslie Bowles. So round of applause for them. Sorry we got started a little bit late here, had a couple of technical difficulties, but that never stops us. So let's get a massive emoji explosion. I want to share something really cool with you guys right now that we just developed.
Wait, can I access investigation materials above my security clearance? What are the gift and entertainment thresholds for prospects? Who do I contact in internal audit to review a fraud allegation? Is HR notification mandatory for an enforced director level administrative leave? What's the monetary threshold for Code 405? Can corrective action plans be completed after the root cause analysis? Does new evidence warrant a case reopening or require a MICE new PHI export restrictions for compliance reports? What's happening?
Look at this cool thing. So
perfect,
easy. We have developed a really cool tool. It is a really cool chatbot where you can load your, within your case management system, you can load in your policies, you can load in your procedures, you can drop those things right in, and your investigators can ask questions. So whether there's a policy in place.
Reach out to your client success manager to learn more.
So if there's a policy in place, if there's a procedure in place, people have questions about that, they can just get those answers immediately. And again, we're always trying to improve our tool. We're trying to take input from the front lines. We're trying to equip smart people who care, like you, with the tools you need to make the impact that is going to be most meaningful. And whenever we can shave off a little bit of time, whenever we can build a little bit more efficiency in there, that leads directly to the effectiveness, which comes from letting our unique resources, our unique skill sets focus our attention on the things that matter most. So you're going to see a theme throughout this presentation about this kind of thing. We're trying to talk about how we can bend the curve on our impact, how we in healthcare can utilize our benchmark report, how we can look at our current processes, our current setup, and how we can make small tweaks to that to really magnify our impact within our organization. We're going to be diving deep today. As usual, we want to keep the conversation going. We want to keep it very organic. So please, as we're talking about things, drop your comments in the chat. Of course, as always, drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat because your network is your net worth. Neither are big enough. And connect with somebody. Many times, us in healthcare, we don't take advantage of this collegial industry that we're in to the extent that some of these less highly regulated industries are able to. But this is really our superpower. This is really our greatest asset. And so there's somebody on here who has built a program. There's somebody on this call today who has conquered the whatever problem you're dealing with. And like I always like to tell my kids and like to tell all my Ethicuties, you get no bonus points for reinventing the wheel. So keep those comments coming, keep those conversations going, share your tips. And of course, the world famous Ethico book giveaway is in live effect. We're going to be giving away we're talking today about how do we level up our program? How do we make the next 10 years in ethics and compliance look significantly different than the last 10 years? And so to do that, we got to level up. We have to employ new tactics. We have to put new strategies in place to really, like I always say, bend the curve. So we're going to be giving away 10 of these today for the best comments, for the best participation in the chat. And you, as always, can double your odds of winning by sharing something on social. That's really the way to get it. Okay, so share something on social of your biggest takeaway, and you're gonna be able to lock in this book. And if you already have this book and you already have a signed copy of this book, and you want to get something else from the Ethical Library, that is there for you as well. Okay, I'm Nick. How's it going? Great to see you all. Chief Servant at Ethico. Gio is my partner, my brother, my mentor, my best friend. I can keep going. He is here as well. And one more round of applause to the wonderful Leslie Bowles. Okay, Leslie Bowles is a friend of Ethico, friend of the family here. And where's the sword? Is that down by your knees there, Leslie? We'd love to see that at some point today. Leslie is co-owner and president at Review Healthcare. She has an extensive background in ethics and compliance, particularly in healthcare. And now she serves as an external consultant to help organizations do exactly what we're talking about. Level up their program, level up their processes, and really help reduce risk and really add more value within their organization. So if you don't know Leslie, get to know her, follow her on LinkedIn. She puts out a ton of great content. And anytime I talk with her, I always find something smart to steal to make me sound smarter. So get your pencils ready. We are going to dive in today to the Ethico Healthcare benchmark report. Ethico is purpose-built for highly regulated industries. Our foundation is in healthcare. We have a high concentration of healthcare clients. And so we have enough data here for us to pull some really great benchmarks and some really great data points for us within healthcare, whose business is very different than a retailer. It's very different than a manufacturer in many cases, to get some insights that we can really take action on. So we are going to talk about issue days open. That's a great proxy for our overall efficiency. We're going to talk about issue anonymity. Issue anonymity is the granddaddy of metric that really is a great barometer for corporate trust. We're going to talk about reporting channels. Where are our reports coming from? What is our job? We're trying to get as much risk intelligence as we can. We're going to talk about issue categories, how we can leverage those to give us better insights. Issue severity, issue substantiation, how successful is our, or how effective, I guess, is our investigation process. We're going to talk a little bit about reporter types. We're already up to almost 500 emojis, which I love. Issue sequence and average reports per 100 employees, which really kind of serves as a process, or serves as a proxy for overall employee engagement. So the executive summary here, I want to walk through a few different things. So what is our goal? Our goal in ethics and compliance is to crowdsource risk intelligence at scale and provide insights back to those points of risk in order to do what? We want to reduce risk in our company. We want to improve our bottom line, and we want to build a culture of integrity where people feel comfortable speaking up. We're going to be talking a lot today about psychological safety and how we can employ and how we can activate other people within our organization, other stakeholders within our organization, to engage with our risk management apparatus, which we're responsible for, to get better risk intelligence and drive more impact. Many teams, or most teams, I would say pretty much all teams, are really only, though, getting a fraction of the risk intelligence that exists within the organization. We have all these human sensors walking around, people that have a 4-pound nuclear reactor between their ears, and everybody sees things and everybody talks. And so when we can engage these folks to speak up more, to give us more information, and we have good software tools in place to direct our efforts toward responding toward those toward responding to the things that matter most, we can really drive a lot more efficiency. Today, more than ever, particularly in our post-COVID new normal era, employees care more about having a voice. Everybody wants to work in an organization that they're proud to work at. Everybody wants to work for a company where they can put their gifts to work toward the noble goal of that organization or the mission of that organization. And we have a unique opportunity within healthcare to really align with this broader mandate, this broader mission of patient care and making a difference in the world. People are not typically picking between healthcare and becoming a bond trader. The people that acclimate to our industry are people that want to leave the world better. They want to leave the world a better place, that are focused on other people. And so you have all these stakeholders that have that kind of an ethos. When we can do a couple of little things to tweak that, we can really magnify our impact. The key to a lot of this, and the key to really bending the curve and making the next 10 years look different than the last 10 years, is going to be doing things different. Like I say, that the biggest needle mover, the biggest point of leverage is going to be engaging middle management. So as we're going through these things with this kind of a frame, I'd love to hear input from people who are listening on how you've been able to do this and how you've been able to start to get more engagement. When we're talking about a particular metric, there's probably some anecdotes, there's probably some heuristics that you've developed over the years. Share those things in the chat, increase your chances to win, and build your network. Okay, let's dive right in first and foremost to case closure time. So case closure time is, like I said, a measure for overall investigation efficiency. And so you can see here that over the last several years, we've, Ethico clients have been able to shave off almost, basically a work week and a half, 27 days down to 21 days. The big rule of thumb around case closure time is you want to close your cases on average within 30 days. What I like to say is we want to close our cases as fast as possible, but no faster, right? We're not trying to solve for a metric here. We want to do the job. We want to bottom out our cases, but we want to do that in the most efficient way possible. So this is a pretty significant drop that we've seen over the last few years. A 3-day drop, almost over a half of a work week in 2024. A lot of that has been driven by enhancements to the tool, higher reliance on the tool to do a lot of those manual things that tend to soak up a lot of our time. Gio, what would you add to this?
Yeah, I would just, I would just highlight that this is kind of, like the blood pressure of these benchmarks that, if your case closure time is good, you're probably getting good information up front. You probably have the right follow-up. You're probably getting the right engagement. You're getting this assigned to the right people and triage properly. So this is a great place to start. And I would encourage everyone to just, compare where you are to this. Because as we go throughout this benchmark report, you should not just be kind of blindly looking at, oh, here's a number, I have to do that. You should compare it. This is comparing these numbers across healthcare companies in our data set. But you should also be looking at where you've been, and just take note as we go through these metrics that, the way that we show these should give you kind of some inspiration and some insight into how you should be evaluating yours. You see, we look at this over time, right? So, it's gone from 27 days down to 21 days over the past 4 or 5 years. You should see if you're seeing that trend. And then, the final thing is whatever you're seeing that is maybe quote unquote not as good as the benchmark, don't be afraid of that. Don't get down on yourself. Look at the positive side of that, of at least you have some hint and some direction of, hey, you know what, maybe I can find something to improve here, and I can better triage and focus on the things that are going to make the most impact on my culture, on my risk management, and on the success of my compliance and ethics team.
Yeah, I mean, when we're going through these things, I want to make sure, I just want to underscore what Gio said. Don't get overwhelmed with any of this stuff. This is just pieces of data. In general, the best benchmark for your organization is your organization. Where have you been? Where have you come from? And where are you trying to go? This is just one data point that perhaps, maybe your case closure time is in the 40s. Okay, great. Let's get that down to the 30s. It's just a game of continuous improvement. Think about your program not in this destination thinking where like at some point I'm going to arrive and be able to sit back, but rather think about it on a journey of continuous improvement. When we can shift into that gear, we now can see a lot of opportunities where otherwise we might, in that sort of fixed mindset, that destination thinking, we might view those same things as threats. As we flip that average on its side, this is a distribution across these different buckets. This is a very helpful way to look at your case closure times, because again, we're trying to, what's the point of all of this data analysis? Of course, there's an external point of it, right? We need to report to the board, or we need to show our value to other stakeholders. Maybe leadership wants to see the improvements, proof of the improvements that we're making. That's sort of the external focus of our data analytics or of our measurement of our program. There's also an internal piece of it that we should be using as our dashboard to guide our efforts, and that should cause us to set goals for improvement. So as you're looking at these things, maybe there's opportunities to improve your process, which we'll talk about some more here in a second. But looking at the aging buckets of your investigations can give you some great clues on where you might need to focus those efforts to get stuff unstuck. So you can see here on the screen, we've divided all the cases up across 4 major buckets: 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, and over 90 plus. Again, we want to have most all, the overwhelming majority we'd like to have in that 0 to 30 day bucket. You can see that we've seen some drops since 2021. In 2021, it was about 80% of cases in the 0 to 30 day bucket. It's still pretty close to that at about 77%. And you can see over on the over 90 day bucket, that's really where the most complex cases live. That's where many times a lot more of our risk lives. We've seen a drop there almost by 50% from 9.3% in 2020 down to about 4.8%. So we tipped back down below 5% last year. So when you look at this, and again, throughout this presentation, we've included the status quo, which we refer to, or we took the numbers from the NAVEX benchmark report. We refer to that as the status quo. NAVEX is the industry leader. They're the IBM of our space, and they have a tremendous market share. So we want to try to pack as much information into one single resource for you so that you can triangulate on these different data points. So when we're looking at our over 90 day bucket, start thinking about what are some commonalities about cases that are in that over 90 day bucket. Leslie, I'd love to hear your reaction. All the way up to 3,000 emojis. This is off to a great start. Pause before you answer. Usually we're likely going to go a few minutes long on this. So if you can't stay for the full hour, all good. The replay will be up on YouTube tonight. or this afternoon. So you can go ahead and check out the back end of it there if you can't stay for what we run over. What's your reaction to this, Leslie, and what kind of perspective can you share on this case closure time question?
Yeah, when I see this, what I see is an opportunity to assess if there's a need to either engage with someone as a third party for those case closure areas or trends, or also if there's also an opportunity to look at different subject matter experts within your organization to assist. Because lots of times working in the hospital setting and seeing this up close and personal, lots of times it is an area where you need to engage someone else, right? And so I would look at that as an opportunity to see if year over year, if you're having the same sort of trends or subjects in that 90 plus bucket, it may be a time to evaluate it from that standpoint as well.
That's a great point. All right, so when we're talking about case closure time, Gio, why don't you walk us through some things to think about if this is an area for some improvement or an opportunity to drive some enhancement to our program?
Yeah, we want to make sure as we go through this that we help guide you toward action, right? It's great to have some data. It's great if that data becomes information and has some interpretation around it. But the real value that we hope you get out of the Ethicsverse and the session is gives you some things that are actionable that says, I'm going to go study this. I'm going to go get the report about this. I'm going to go see if I can fix this thing. So we're going to try to jump into these things as we go through these metrics. So one is to just think about this as an operational process. Obviously, some of this is going on in the chat. Every case doesn't follow a straight line. Sometimes you have follow-ups and sub-cases and investigations and new issues and things like that. But in any process, there are bottlenecks, right? There are things that keep you from moving forward. It could be capacity issues. It could be a lack of information. It could be a lack of engagement. Maybe someone else doesn't get back to you on time. But you want to think about and see if you can see from your data what things cause bottlenecks in your procedure, and is it related to a certain stage? Is it only related to these certain types of, we'll be talking about categories later and things like that. But you can take a sampling, it's great to do this as like a big study and you have a good, population and sample set and you can just do some really deep data, or you can just also look at your like 5 or 10 longest cases and say, hey, what's going on with these? Oh yeah, this kind of sat for a long time here. This person went on vacation or whatever might have happened. And you want to see if, are there stages or are there certain events that are causing your long dated cases to take as long as they do. And then, we're going to do some things as we go through this benchmark report today of showing you how you can compare different stats and different contributors to get these insights. So, the second bullet is around, are there certain facility types, or are there certain locations, or are there certain divisions in your company where these things are just naturally taking longer? And then you can kind of break that down and say, okay, should we retrain that? Or is it always going to be that way? And we should find a different way to improve our overall average closure time. And then, if you've looked at it year over year, right, you've compared kind of 2020 till now or something like that, you might want to look at what things have changed for you and your team. You might have kind of done a restructuring or taken on an acquisition, or, like it says here, there might be some regulatory changes that necessitate that, that took another 3 steps to close those types of cases because we got to make sure that's right. And all of this is to say that there's always a follow-up question that you can ask of say, well, why did it do that way? Why did it happen that way? Or, what is causing this specific change in there that you can dig down to until you get to that action. And we really encourage everyone here to be trying to find, not just like the broad reflection on, oh, that's interesting, maybe 27 days is good, but try to walk out of here with like some notes or, a couple of follow-up action items for you to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go run this report, or I'm going to look at these things and see if we can find some area for improvement here. Because we're all here on the Ethicsverse to learn. Let's learn.
Let's learn. All right. So we got a couple of tips on how to, smash down your case closure rate. Again, we're not trying to compromise quality. We're not trying to compromise the employee experience or our investigation process adherence. But we want to look for opportunities to really shave off time and drive more efficiency through our process. So establish. My favorite tip here is really kind of trying to establish better, response timelines for different types of cases. So if something's escalated, maybe you want to have a different goal, maybe a particular category, you want to have a different goal for case closure time. The more we can disaggregate, or the more we can, that's the word. The more we can disaggregate our broad number and see what those component pieces are and start to draw connections between what's going into that outcome, the more likely we are to find clues to improve. What other tips really resonate with you, or what would you add here, Leslie?
One of the things that I have seen in my experience is that sometimes a lot of these areas where you see this delay in response has to do with lack of collaboration. And so I love how you have that third point there, cross-functional collaboration. There are a lot of areas that do intersect with quality when it comes to compliance matters in healthcare, to the point where both the DOJ and the OIG have opined on it and found it necessary for them to collaborate. And I think a lot of programs are missing that aspect, right? There are times where you need clinical decision-making, insight and experience. You may need nursing. You may need someone from your quality office. So I think we need to get in the habit of collaborating more, point blank, period. There was always this thought process that compliance needed to be siloed because of the nature in which we carried out the investigation, but that needs to change.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, when the ethics and compliance department in a healthcare organization is working best, it should be changing the direction of that ship. That's like the rudder in the back of the ship, or that's like the sail of the ship, not like the barnacle on the ship. A barnacle on the ship is not like changing the direction of the ship. So we're not going to be able to like change that direction, though, to your point, if we're not collaborating, if we don't have inroads with these other departments, when we haven't established ourselves as quote unquote business people that are, helpers, that are, serving the organization in terms of helping the organization meet its mission in a more effective way. So what I like to think about with respect to our investigation operation is to really look at it as a business process. In any complex business process, it's just a series of steps, okay? And in any complex system, there is one step that is the constraint on that system. And so your job, if you're trying to optimize any system, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's a business system like a investigation process, is to identify those bottlenecks and figure out how to increase the throughput. If you can limit or if you can increase the throughput at the bottleneck, the entire system begins to operate in a more efficient way. So we're going to, as we're going through this, start thinking about what are the steps that happen for, at a high level for all my investigations. Where do things tend to get stuck? Is it on case closure? Is it on triage? How can I leverage technology to maybe eliminate that sort of manual triage? Or how can I connect my tool to another system so that, these cases automatically go to the people that need them fastest? All right. We're jumping to the next one. I love this one. Issue anonymity is such an opportunity and such a killer in some organizations. Issue anonymity is the barometer for broad corporate trust. So you can see we've seen a nice increase in identified rate. So the dark colored lines are the proportion of calls or cases where the person is identified. And then the lighter color is obviously the anonymous rate. So you can see that about 73%, almost 3/4 of all the reports that came through the system were identified. Obviously, we want to try to max that out. We're never going to get to 100%, but when we can max that out, the odds of us being able to substantiate it is higher. The odds of us being able to follow up with that person, to thank them, to follow up after about retaliation, which we'll be talking about a bunch toward the end of this presentation. All those things are higher. That drives a lot more goodness and a lot more opportunity through our program. When you compare that to the status quo, you can see that that's below 50%, kind of around 44%, and it's been flat for the last couple of years. So when you're thinking about your issue anonymity, there's a lot of opportunities to improve that rate and drive more trust. As you would expect, I'm going to dive in through a couple more of these metrics here. If you have not downloaded the benchmark report, you need to laminate that and put that right on your bedside table. Give that out to your friends, perhaps. But the full benchmark report has a ton of extra data points that we're obviously not going to have time to cover today. But you can see here how these anonymous rates change across different sectors. So rehab, senior care and rehab, life sciences and biotech and hospitals and clinics, those are kind of a little bit closer to that average of about 75%. And then we see health, finance, and support services obviously higher. Typically, these seem to kind of correlate with broad risk within the business. Healthcare services, support services, health, finance services, support services are kind of intrinsically a little bit lower risk than some of these other areas. But again, as we're talking about these benchmarks, you should be referencing your own numbers and be looking for opportunities to improve it. If you're in healthcare, if you're in life sciences, for example, and your anonymous rate is down at 50%, well, there's probably some opportunity to get that up closer to 2/3, along with this this group that you're seeing on the screen here. Gio, let's dive into this graphic, and Leslie, of course, jump in at any point on this. But walk us through this infographic here and what your biggest takeaways are.
Yeah, so this is another way that we're going to help guide you to dig in on this. And, on the left side, it's looking at that first stat that we showed about your days to close and looking at, hey, is your days to close different if your reporters are anonymous or identified? We see within this data set within healthcare, those are pretty close. We see that vary across some other industries. But that's if you see a big variance there, you might look into, what are the things that are keeping me challenged? It's probably likely to have a bigger gap and have longer time to close your cases when someone's anonymous. Or, if it's significantly lower, maybe those are getting closed with kind of a, there's not much to do here. We can't figure much out. And then you have to figure out, can we get better interaction with anonymous reporters, get better follow-up with them, even though they're anonymous, or better information on the initial report of information. And then below that, you see this submitted, doing the same comparison for in-office on that channel versus online at the top, and then on the hotline as well. So, generally, the things that are going to drive this are the quality of the information that you get up front, the clarity of the process afterward, and how well and how clearly you can, do follow-up and get the information that you need to close out the case. So looking at, days closed by channel, by anonymous and identified can give you some really rich detail to dig into that. And then on the right side here, we're comparing the categories of these reports in through these different channels and seeing, hey, where am I getting a high level of anonymity versus someone identifying themselves? And you'll see that on the bottom left there, discrimination, harassment, retaliation, those are generally things that people are concerned about reporting and maybe are concerned about more retaliation or something like that. You see a high rate there, and you want to try to look at this in your own data set to try to figure out, where am I seeing things divert from the average, or where am I seeing more problems come up for us?
And I would bet if you did this analysis crossing these two metrics, channel versus anonymous, you're probably going to see some interesting things. I mean, look at the gap here. I mean, between 17 days for identified on the bottom right and anonymous here in the middle of 30 days. That's almost twice as long. So there's probably some opportunity through education, through how you engage, like Frank said, following up with folks, or I'm sorry, I think Francisco said it, following up with folks soon, early and often can do a lot to build that trust. We're going to be talking, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of illustrate this concept because many times I have found in conversations that I've had with compliance folks is that we sometimes, ironically, we sometimes tend to look at like these metrics in isolation. Sure, you can get some some information from like a sort of a single dimension, looking at a metric in a single dimension. But where the real value comes in data analytics many times is by looking at different metrics together. So if you think about this, let's say you have a really, really low reporting rate. If somebody says, hey, I think my reporting rate might be too low. Is it too low? I would say, well, I don't know. I need some more information. What's your anonymous rate? So that's a way that you can kind of start to triangulate. If we have a really low, so if you look at this, where is what end of this matrix do we want to be on? Which end of the matrix do we not want to be on? Okay, I just gave you the answer. Okay, so a really low reporting rate with a really high anonymous rate, that means we have really low employee engagement in our risk management apparatus, and there's not a lot of corporate trust. Obviously, we want to flip those things, but you're going to be able to see different trends as you cut this across division or across category or across other metrics like that. So these, again, can give us some tips. Like if you're down in the bottom left and we want to move to the top right, well, then we need to do something to engage these folks in a bit of a different way. So we're going to try to do some campaigns to really relaunch our Speak Up program, perhaps. We're going to have some videos and we're going to have some talk tracks that we give middle managers to help build that trust and help folks understand the protections that we put in place. As that trust starts to build, we're going to start to see a little bit of a higher, typically what I've seen is we start to get a little bit of a higher reporting rate as more of those little ducklings walk out onto the frozen lake. And once that trust is there, then we're going to start to see that anonymous rate drop. But again, all of these metrics can move in the right direction. Let's dive into some different things that we can think about with respect to our issue anonymity. Gio, you want to walk us through this piece?
Yeah, so this anonymity rate, like we've talked about, is really a great barometer for your corporate trust and how well do people think that they're going to be treated for speaking up. Generally, like on that matrix we were talking about, you'd rather get an anonymous report than no report at all. But too high of an anonymous rate, or a high anonymous rate in a low set of total issues, is likely to indicate that the only people speaking up are the people that are only willing to step out on that ice a little bit. So you want to look at have changes like changes in leadership shifted your anonymity rate. If you used to have a certain rate, maybe a quarter of your people were anonymous, and then you get a new manager in a clinic, or you get a new leader over division, and a bigger proportion of your reports are coming in anonymous. Those are people saying, hey, I really feel like I need to say something about this, but also I don't want to be involved because that's probably going to be a mess for me. And that fear, right, that lack of psychological safety is something that we want to try to figure out how we can impact. And then, you also might see an indication that the cultures in certain facilities or service lines or, the titles that people have in the place that they work might also be driving anonymity. So, high pressure environments like emergency departments, ORs, and things like that might show different reporting patterns than something that more predictable. And you want to see if those things are coming up in your anonymity rate, because again, that if you can build that trust, that's going to lead to a bunch of other things that, if you have higher trust in your program, it's going to lead to a bunch of other good outcomes. You'll be getting better information, maybe closing cases faster, being more efficient, maybe substantiating more of your issues and, kind of finding out clear information that you can do something about. So use this as a way to kind of pick apart your overall average anonymity rate and compare that to your total cases, and compare that to some of the things that might be different across geographies and, divisions and, places that people work, to see if you can find some spots to really focus on. This is part of what we want to do, and we want to build this risk radar of, hey, where are the risks and where can I put some better effort, better focus, retraining, better engagement to really improve the overall culture of trust that's going to improve the overall culture of ethics.
So when you're thinking about, please.
I was going to say, if I could just add one other thing, I think it's also very interesting to compare your anonymity rate with your reporting of issues at exit interview, right? Because that tells you a lot about your culture. Because if you're in an organization where you have your anonymity rate is high, then as your individuals or all your employees are leaving out the door, they're reporting all these compliance issues. That tells you have a huge problem, right? And so I think it's also to take this a step further and also compare it to that, because oftentimes we forget to do that in collaboration with HR to tell us a lot about our programs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, if you have a Speak Up program in place, brushing a couple more crumbs off the table, emptying out a couple more pennies to get exit interviews embedded as well is going to like 10x the amount of risk intelligence you're going to get, and it's going to remove this massive impediment that prevents people from speaking up, which is the fear of retaliation, right? So adding that in, again, we have to try to stack the deck in our favor to magnify our impact. We were talking in our pre-show, Leslie, we can't let whatever circumstances we have, whatever, limitations we have, whatever constraints we have stop us from putting the ball in the net. Like, that's the game. We got to figure out a way to put the ball in the net. So there's a lot of technology out. There's a lot of, great things being done, a lot of, enhancements being done to the technology that's in our marketplace. There's a lot of technology that's at your fingertips that you can utilize to really leverage your impact. So when we're thinking about, issue anonymity, and we're thinking about, fostering a culture of speak up, what we're really talking about is psychological safety. And I swear I'm not going to go too long on this, but remember that famous Amy Edmondson book, The Fearless Organization, where this concept of psychological safety was introduced. This entire concept was based on a study that was done within healthcare, and they saw a massive correlation. And I think they denominated it based on malpractice lawsuits, but they saw a massive correlation between organizations where nurses felt comfortable speaking up against, surgeons versus those where they didn't. And the ones where they did feel comfortable, where they had a more psychologically safe environment, that led to much better patient outcomes, much more successful healthcare organizations, and much lower malpractice, claims. So this concept was bred out of and birthed out of healthcare, and we have the opportunity to really build that within our organizations. Okay, let's dive right into reporting channel use. So this, when I think about reporting channel use, and I think about total reports that are coming in, this can give us some clues about broad sort of employee engagement. So you can see here, we kind of stayed flat from last year. We're up at almost 4 reports per 100 compared to the status quo of about 1.5 reports. But what I'm really proud of is that, a year and a half, couple years ago, we really started pushing this concept of compliance champions, activating middle managers. And what I think is great in this data set is if you look in that middle category, that in office, that in person, that middle manager report, that's almost as much as the status quo total speak up rate. So again, there's a ton of opportunity within our operation to drive more risk intelligence. And then again, when we can leverage our technology to not waste our time, pulling, is this a needle? Oh no, that's a piece of hay. But we can just spend all of our time finding those needles and working on those. We can drive a lot more impact. Okay, so what you can see here is that hotline is still the dominant channel, but we've seen some significant movements in some of these other channels. Ideally, we're going to be agnostic about where these reports coming from. Who cares if somebody slips a ransom note style note under your door, or they come in through the hotline, or they talk to a manager? Our job is to just get more of that engagement, and again, focus our efforts on the things that move the needle most. We've also seen an improvement in or an increase in the web reports. Again, we can't be agnostic if the employee experience or the data or the data quality that we get out of these channels is significantly different. So we've tried to build some smart things, which we call an adaptive interview, into all these channels, both in terms of enablement for middle managers, launch kits to help relaunch your program and enable those folks to get the right information so that your investigators can hit the ground running, and dynamic things on your web form to, if somebody answers to the affirmative to a particular question, diving in and asking for some more detail. Again, our hotline is all trained with CCEP folks, and they spend about twice as long on the call, so that again, we can get better information and those investigators can hit the ground running. I'm going to jump right down to some things to think about. Gio, when you're thinking about reporting channel use, what are you thinking about? What are some considerations we can kind of have top of mind as we look at our own operation and see where are some levers we can pull to really unleash some more risk intelligence for us?
Yeah, so I think you want to start with the biggest number here and start with your number of total reports. That's why we show this in a comparison of stacked bar charts. Because if you just show the percentage and you say, oh, we're getting 40% of our reports online, well, if you're getting 0.8 reports per 100 employees, well, you're missing something else. It's not just the proportion. What we're trying to get is information, not just some mix. But this mix can help you as you break it down. So, if you're let's say you're kind of in the middle here. You're maybe at like 2.5 reports per 100 employees per year. And then as a follow-up, you look at this and say, oh, you know what? We're not getting that many reports in office. We need to do something to drive people to engage with compliance more, make it easier for them, remind them that we're around and available for them. Because based on these benchmarks, I should be getting, a pretty healthy portion, a little bit more or almost a third of my reports from kind of in-office people reporting directly to compliance or through proxy. So, you might look at that. And, the big thing that has persisted here is that, we still see, and, we see this really strongly in healthcare. We see this across our other benchmarks, but a strong, despite all the technology, all the robots coming for our jobs and AI coming, there's still a human element to compliance. There's still a human element to culture and ethics. And there are some of these sensitive issues that people are still going to want to pick up the phone and, not just fill out a chat bot or fill out a web form, but talk to somebody personally. And, it's interesting to compare that to the rate at which people are willing to talk directly to compliance. Some of that is just, availability and, maybe your hotline, should be 24/7. But some of it is, someone saying, hey, you know what, I like that, that wall of a third party. I can report this to the third party. I still like to talk to them and kind of work through this issue. The fact that I think that people were calling for the end of the call center and hotlines 10 years ago when they say, hey, everyone can just kind of go online. There are a lot of, even Amazon has moved from, you can hardly even email someone to now you can call and talk to support on Amazon, because there's a piece of that if we want to serve our culture, serve our people, be available for them, there are still some issues people want to talk to somebody about.
When you think about this metric, Leslie, what would you add here?
Yeah, the one thing that I would add here is I think it's great that this number for in-office or in-person has increased, right? Because I think it's a very beneficial way to gather insight about issues and also to educate. In my experience, a lot of times I use them as opportunities to educate as well as listen. And then I also think it just goes to show that there is an increase in trust in compliance professionals, which is very, very important. And I think too, I think these metrics are so important too, because we think about the remote environment versus in-person environment and how that affects the way in which individuals report. I would look at it from that standpoint as well. Like, in what ways do your employees find it more accessible, more comfortable? So those are my thoughts around it.
Very good. Gio, can you try to change the slides? Something has messed up with my my console here.
Yeah, I just clicked it. Give it
moving
another one.
Okay. Joa, if you can drop the, we published this presentation, so if you can drop that in the chat as we figure this out, we can keep this moving, okay? Drop that link for the presentation in the chat, please. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about here is this concept of abandonment rate. Gio, can you take this slide, please? I'm trying to get this figured out.
Sure. Let me get my version of the slides going.
Sorry about this, gang. We had some technical difficulties with this platform, and I have a strongly worded letter locked and loaded for our provider, so that might be getting sent before they know it.
Nick, you want to start talking about reporting channel use across size of company?
No, I want to talk about abandonment rate, please. Slide 32.
Okay, so yeah, that's great. So, given that almost half of the reports are on the hotline, one thing that you want to check for that hotline, and you should really check this type of thing for any of your channels, is how available is that for the people who go there. So let's do an example for contrast. If you tell people to go to your web form, and 10% of the time that people go to that web form, if they get a 404 error, it doesn't load, it doesn't work, that's going to really destroy trust in your compliance organization. Someone's going to be like, hey, I went to the web form, I followed the link, it's on the intranet, like I know I went to the right place, and it's not even working. So these guys probably don't even care that much about getting this report. And when I say guys, I mean all genders. The proxy for the page not loading for your hotline and people calling in is the abandonment rate. So what abandonment rate is, how many people, give me an emoji of a thumbs up if you ever done this when you're like calling the cable company or, trying to make a reservation. You call up, you're waiting, maybe you get some music, maybe someone says, hey, we'll be back to you a little bit later. Please wait on the line, press 2 if you'd like us to call you back or whatever. You're waiting, you're like, this is not even worth it. And you hang up the phone, right? You say, well, I'll not do it, or I'll get a reservation somewhere else or something like that. So that happens on your hotline, right? Like if you have hundreds of people calling over a period of time or whatever, some of those people, if they're waiting 25 minutes for it, or it's not the right behavior for them, then they're gonna abandon. So the concept for this, the stat for it, is the abandonment rate. And, what's normal in call centers is, maybe a 10 to 15, maybe 20% abandonment rate, right? And they just say, we'll get them later, right? That's not really critical stuff. What we've heard is standard from people who have come to us is their abandonment rate with another provider has been, kind of in an 8 to 10, maybe 12% rate. That means that 10 people call, one of those, they hang up and you may never get the report. So you want to check this, hopefully everyone's doing test calls at least annually, hopefully quarterly for your hotline to see how that experience is. But you should also get some stats from whoever your partner is for your Speak Up hotline, and figure out what their abandonment rate is. It's something that, in the time that Nick and I have been here at Ethico, we've put a lot of effort into. We've done training and technology and, goals and stuff around it. And we've driven that down to about 1% abandonment rate. So that means that out of 100 people who call, there's only one person who gives up and says, hey, you know what, this is not worth my time. I'm waiting too long. We're really proud of that, not just because it took a lot of work to get there, and it's better than competitors in this space, but we're proud of it because it represents the thing that's close to our heart of making sure that your employees, whoever is working with us, those people are treated with respect and dignity, and they're not getting kind of the short end of the stick because we staff our team too thinly. So that's going to be something that is going to drive this cycle that happens in everyone's culture, right? Culture and compliance is a respiration that happens. People experience things and people contribute to the culture. If people are consistently met with good responsiveness, a good experience, and they're not abandoning that, then you're not only getting more reports, you're getting a compounding effect of that person has a good experience. They're going to defend it or speak well of your program when someone, asks them if they should report or something like that. So that's just something that we've seen as a key. And, we were shocked when we started measuring this, how different and how much better the experience was within our Speak Up program here from other people in this space, just because it seems so obvious that somebody should be able to get in contact. If you're spending all of this effort driving Speak Up programs, talking about it in Compliance Week, hoping to send out newsletters, making people do their compliance training so they know how to report. You're putting all this effort in, and there's like somebody walking up to the restaurant about to go in and the door's locked. And they're just like, okay, well, I'll go to another restaurant. So one way to, we're getting it up on the screen for one of the presenters here. One way to measure that is your abandonment rate.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm sorry. Joe, if you can go back to slide 33, apologies, guys. We're just kind of doing this on the fly. That's how we do it around here. This train ain't stopping. We're going to keep it moving. So Joe is going to share his screen, and we'll just be popping it up and down. But Joe, if you can go back to slide 33, please. I would love to walk through these issue categories together. If you're following along at home, this is slide 31. If you're following along on that short link, and we'll continue to drop that in the chat so you guys can follow along at home. Okay.
So real quick, Nick, if we're going to do this, just a little advice to everyone how to navigate this console here. I'm still seeing the reporting channel use slide up in the main area. Mm-hmm. If you go over to your media player where you're seeing the presenters, there's a box with an arrow pointing to the left that you can kind of maximize that one so that you see more of the it should be a slide with number 4 and issue categories on it. You can adjust a bunch, you can have it your way here on this platform, and you can move the focus to the updated slides that we're showing.
So we've seen some interesting moves in issue categories. As we're walking through issue categories, we do a lot to normalize categories across different, clients so that, these are comparable in the aggregate. For issue categories, the best comparison is really going to be your historical performance. So we've seen some interesting trends over the last year. The biggest movements, with the stability of these programs, movements of 1 or 2% can sometimes be very significant. So we've seen a pretty significant pop in privacy and infosec and fraud, theft, property damage. Okay. Both going up about 2.5%. And we saw a little bit of a drop of about 1% in HR issues. HR issues still account for about 25%, but within healthcare, we see a lot more sort of compliance-like stuff than we do see in, less highly regulated, industries. So about 25%, depending on which of these you would group in there, about 25 to 30% of total categories are compliance-like stuff. Okay, let's jump to the next slide 32. And Gio and Leslie, I'd love to hear your takeaways from this infographic. Also, quick round of applause for our ethical marketing team. I mean, these infographics just keep getting better and better. I love it. All right, so what is your takeaway from this, and what kind of conclusions can we draw from these numbers in aggregate?
Yeah, so I think each of these can kind of tell its own story. And as we look through these, I think that we can, you can get a nice comparison to your peers and see if some of this is making sense. So some of this was coming up in the chat. What proportion of the issues you get are employees talking about most, or inversely, this 37.1%. How many of your issues are human resources issues? So just within this, you can look at, what are we getting from vendors or employees or, senior leaders or something like that? And then how many of those are human resources issues? Just below that, you see the biggest one that customers are reporting in healthcare are EHS issues, right? Cleanliness, risk in the environment, risk to people or the environment and things like that. Interestingly, sometimes you can look at some of these smaller numbers and see how the mix or the count is really not correlated to the total risk. And by that, I mean, look in the bottom right, compliance, regulatory, conflict of interest, legal, that's 10% of your issues, but you probably have a disproportionate focus on those issues. That on average, each of those issues is probably kind of higher risk, and you're probably digging deeper into those. Those maybe have more complexity that you're working across different teams with, or splitting out into more investigations. So looking at breaking this down by your category and then by something else like who's reporting it, it is one interesting way that you can get some insight into this. And then comparing your overall average, right? We see on here that on the right side, we see environment, health, and safety is 8.5% of your total issues. But in the bottom left, you're seeing it's 28% of customer issues. So that can give you some shape of, when I look in these different populations, or I look at these different segments of my reporters, where are most of their concerns? And then, what's cool about that is if again, we're going to always try to push this to action. You don't just take that as, oh, that's interesting, there's a number there that's different, but you can say, how might that change my compliance roadmap this quarter or plans that I'm making this year? You say, hey, you know what? I'm really trying to build more trust with our customers and our patients. And the company is broadly really looking to get better, patient engagement and patient satisfaction. So I can dig into some of those EHS issues and bind my focus and my goals to the company's goals and really dig in there. There's a lot of richness in this data, even when you just have, 2 or 3 different ways to cut your data.
And I would just add, too, I think, again, for me, it's all about the action from this data. This data is fantastic because what it helps you to do is helps you to identify, again, collaborations. And sometimes it sits. HR is the buzzword that we use when we talk about hotlines, but there's so many other areas that compliance needs to be collaborating with. When I look at environmental issues, your environmental department, or however you label it in your organization, tying that with patient satisfaction also helps to improve those scores. And being a part of that collaborative team is also equally important. And I think this is where compliance programs have an opportunity to really see where they're not collaborating on some of these issues or trends. Even something as simple as leadership changes can also contribute to some of these numbers and data. So I think it's really important to look at this collaboratively as well.
So a couple of tips about your issue categories. We're going to move quick here through the next couple here, but a couple of tips about your issue categories is, you want to like you don't want to change your categories all the time, but they should work for you. So if your business has changed, or you've done an acquisition, or you're rethinking and you're saying, man, discrimination and harassment, those aren't two different things. That's one thing. Use those things to, use your categories as a tool to help drive better data analytics down the road, right? This system, like all systems, is a garbage in, garbage out system. That's just how systems work. So when we can use our categories and we can be smart about them, look, we don't want 10,000 categories. We also don't want 2 categories. So we need to have as few categories as possible, but no fewer, and then really use our subcategories to dive in deeper. We had a client who came over back in the day, and we were helping them set up their reporting on our tool, and they had literally 90 categories, and every category had 1, 3, 5 reports. We want to have big enough buckets that can allow for a statistically significant analysis to be done, so that the conclusions that we draw have a higher likelihood of being true, first of all, and have a higher likelihood for the hypothesis that's going to drive our action to be more valid. Okay, so adjust your categories to reflect specific concerns. And if you're making a change to your categories, it should be very easy in your tool or with your client success person to make sure that those changes are reflected historically. Many times we think we can't change these categories because we're going to lose the longitudinal comparison value in our data set. But again, going back to my discrimination and harassment combination, we'll just go ahead and combine those historically, and then now you'll have a consistent data set that you can look historically underneath, using your new lens. When we're thinking about our category taxonomy, again, we want to use it to enhance our data quality and help lay the foundation, again, stack the deck in our favor. We want to lay the foundation for better insights or insight potential down the road. We're now on issue severity, slide 40. These next couple we're going to go through quickly. So you can see issue severity. We saw a pretty big increase during COVID 20 and 21, which we would come to expect. And then we saw that come down a bit. So this top layer is our most severe. This is most impactful and most urgent. The second layer down is highly severe but not urgent, and then the bottom one is everything else. So again, depending on your business, depending on the type of sub-industry you're in within healthcare, you're going to see wildly different trends here. If we jump to the next slide, slide 41, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And as we would expect, these are correlated with the risk of the sub-industry that you're in. So support services, health finances, these are not typically high risk areas, right? Whereas if you compare that to rehabilitation and senior care, where we might have people in hospice or hospitals in general, those have a much higher acuity. They have a much higher, risk sort of profile. And so as you look at the severities within your own organization, look for trends and look for changes on, how those may have moved. And if nothing else, at least be able to find or at least be able to come up with some kind of a story as to why those may have changed. Did we have, a pandemic? Did we have an acquisition? Was there a chemical spill somewhere that caused these severities to pop significantly? So walk us through, Gio and Leslie, what we should be thinking about with respect to our severities. If we see a pop in our severities, what is kind of the algorithm or what's a good framework we can step through to make sure that we're not leaving extra risk on the table?
Yeah, one of the best,
I think first. Go ahead, Leslie. Please start.
Go ahead. No. I was going to say one of the best quotes that I've ever heard is that not every risk that you identify requires an audit. And I think if you have a one-frame way of addressing risk and not assessing the best way to mitigate that risk is your first problem when it comes to issue severity. I think every organization, no matter where you are, should be looking at risk from a risk-based standpoint. And so within risk-based, you really should have a 3-pronged approach, right? In which way? Is it audit? Is it education? Is it some sort of monitoring follow-up or miscellaneous way in which we need to address it? And so I think, 2, issue severity is also based on how you've prioritized risk in your organization. So it should reflect that layout as well.
Yeah, that's great, Leslie. I love that quote. I might frame that one. Not every risk requires an audit. I think something else you want to look at is is it okay? Something else you want to look at is you might just be getting more reports about your risk. So it's always hard. We kind of only consume the information that we get, and that's why we're trying to crowdsource more risk intelligence at scale all the time in our programs. But you might want to look at those things and figure out if there's any indication that, all that effort that we've been doing to drive Speak Up and drive people into these is really, we're finding out about these things more because, probably 2 or 3 years ago, we would have found about that too late on an exit interview or once, it had been going on for a long time. So one way that you can do that, and you're probably going to do this kind of anecdotally rather than setting this for all of your issues, is see if for your severe issues, how soon after the event are people reporting it? Because we see things come into our system where someone's like, yeah, this has been going on for like a year and a half and it's just like happened 7 times and I just got to tell somebody. If more of your severe issues are like, yeah, this just happened and, I know that you guys are on top of it, so I just wanted to let you know about it so you can do something on it. That might be one indication that you don't have necessarily more, like a higher count of severe issues. Maybe people are speaking up more with you. So there's always kind of that layer that you can figure out of, hey, is this a result of something else that we've been doing? And maybe we're getting a higher count of severe issues because people are telling us sooner. Or, another indicator of that of, do I have more related issues? You should be able to relate issues within your case management system and say, hey, you know what? These are 4 different people reporting something. These are all the same type of thing in the same division. And I want to be able to look at these things progressing differently. So if you're getting a higher count of severe issues, but there's a higher correlation of those being related, that's great if you have several people who are witnesses to something speaking up and letting you know about it. Those might be indicators of increasing strength, which might go against like the immediate reaction of like, oh, we had more severe issues reported, things might be getting worse.
Good point. Okay, so let's jump to slide 45, please. Again, the key issue here, the key with issue severity is we need to use our tool, we need to use our risk management apparatus to serve us to, again, stack the deck and give us a higher likelihood of success. So when we can utilize our severity ratings to ensure that the highest risks receive the best attention and the most appropriate attention soonest, we're going to be able to direct our limited resources in the right way to get the biggest bang for our buck. Let's jump to issue substantiation. So a lot of us use issue substantiation as a proxy or as a high-level indicator of kind of investigation effectiveness. So we see a really interesting move this year, an almost 5-point move in issue substantiation. We want definitely 50% plus of our issues to be substantiated, if possible. And as I saw a comment in the chat, in many cases, this is a function of education. This is a function of people knowing whether or not, what they need to report. So whether they're anonymous or identified, if we can get that good information, our investigators can hit the ground running. We can drive usually much faster case closure time and usually a much higher substantiation rate. So we've seen a nice increase here with about 45% being unsubstantiated compared to 45% substantiated on the status quo. So when I want to bring up one thing before we jump to the next slide here, substantiation is kind of a slow metric. Okay, I love this concept of fast and slow metrics. Your gas gauge is a slow metric on your dashboard in your car. Your speedometer is a fast metric. So how can we, as ethics and compliance folks, again, stack the deck in our favor and create data pools that allow us to more quickly get a feedback loop of whether something's working or whether something's not working? That's a broad concept, but we can really multiply the impact of that concept when we can tie that or we can create what I'm talking about with respect to something that can prove effectiveness. A lot of us are up at night wondering if our program can withstand external scrutiny, and that's a question of effectiveness. So what we've seen over the last year since we released this feature, we released this feature called CAP, or Corrective Action Plan. And what this allows for is for you to create a library of to-do lists, so to speak. Usually, the end of an investigation is not the end of something. It's actually the start of something. It's like, okay, now I have to do something. So what this feature set allows for, and again, you can do this on paper yourself, or you can do it in a spreadsheet if you don't have this functionality. But the Corrective Action Plan feature allows for consistent application of corrective actions that can be substantiated, validated, and measured. So when we can say, okay, look, every single discrimination every discrimination report that we have substantiated, it needs to have 5 or 6 things happen. The person needs to be retrained. Their manager needs to be notified and we need to, update their HR file. Whatever those steps are, whether it's a slip and fall in this state that might have different rules, you can just click a button, then boom, you have now some proof within a month or within a quarter to show, yep, look at the effectiveness of our program. 95% of these types of cases had corrective action plans applied consistently. And so when we're talking about organizational justice and we're talking about really trying to dial in our programs and not letting latent risks sort of fester, the more we can do to give ourselves visibility and give ourselves some handles on our program, the better. Anything to add there, guys? All right, so let's jump into the next slide, slide 47. Gio, walk us through what we want to think about with respect to issue substantiation, and then Leslie, we'll go to you about some tips or some of your favorite tips about how to really maximize this super important metric. Oh, did Gio leave? Yowza. He just left me hanging here. My goodness. Okay. All right. So, so when we're looking at issue substantiation, this was another comment in the chat. Cut that against your anonymous rate. Cut that against different categories, and you might see some interesting and significant trends. So, how can you analyze your substantiation trends to identify room for improvement? Again, all this data analytics, this is not navel gazing. This is a way for us to make sure that our to-do list or our goals for the quarter are going to be the ones that are going to have the greatest impact. If we jump to the next slide, I want you to think about how you can analyze your substantiation trends in your organization to maximize the risk intelligence that you're getting. You might be in a low trust organization as determined by your anonymous rate, where people are not who don't, they don't feel good about identifying themselves. Okay, well, how can I see some opportunities for improvement in my substantiation rate in the context of that environment? That might be a change to your directive, right? That might be a change to what is read or what's listed when somebody goes to submit a report that helps inform them what this process looks like. Maybe it's a training with middle managers. Maybe it's a quarter-long initiative where you're really trying to, quote unquote, relaunch your program and push out into the organization all the information and the education that a potential reporter might need to feel more comfortable. Part of that that information you're pushing out into the organization should be instructions for them about what's most important. Hey, whether you want to identify yourself or you want to stay anonymous, either one is fine. We put these protections in place because we care about you as a human being and as an employee of this organization, and we're really serious about retaliation. But in either of the circumstances, whether you're anonymous or identified, it's really critical that we get X, Y, and Z information if we're going to go ahead and be able to do something about that report. If somebody's speaking up, it means they want something done about it. So if we can equip them with the right information, the odds of them giving the odds of them helping us help them is going to be a lot higher. Let's jump down to some tips. Let's jump down to slide 50, please. So Leslie, when you're thinking about substantiation rate and how do you look at it, and what do you, what kind of tips would you share with the audience on how they can maybe maximize that and move the needle on this a little bit?
What I will say is most compliance professionals, now some are, but most of them do not have a clinical background, right? Some of them are lawyers, they're compliance professionals. And I think it is extremely important. I believe it's on slide 51 to have this cross-clinical consultation. I think your employees, majority of them being clinical in nature, like to feel that you are getting clinical insight when substantiating issues that are being brought forward. And if you're the type of compliance professional that rarely ever consults with on clinical matters, that can also discourage a lot of different factors when it comes to reporting, especially from your clinical staff. And so I like this idea of establishing a clinical consultation network and how extremely important it is for compliance professionals who do not have clinical expertise within their departments and don't have it themselves. So there's some really complex issues that come up in healthcare a lot that require that sort of consultation.
But yeah, and I love that point. And again, if this next 10 years is going to be different, we have to show up in the business in a different way. We have to build that network, and we have to plug in to these different departments and have relationships there if we're going to be brought in and if they're going to answer our call, right? We don't want to be met with the, ad hoc out of office meeting, response. We want people to pick up our call. And once that is established, once these relationships are established, the ability to actually utilize this cross-collaborative network is going to be higher, and it's going to be something that can really be part of our tool set. Let's jump down to slide 55 because we got a few more metrics to cover before we get to the end here. If we jump down to slide 55, I just think with respect to issue substantiation, the real key here is, focus on conducting quality investigations that lead to sound conclusions, but also remember that there are other participants in the investigation process. It gets kicked off usually by somebody raising their hand. So when those folks understand what you need in order to do your job, they are more likely to give you that information, and the odds of it being a substantiatable report are going to be a lot higher. Let's jump into reporter types next. So reporter types, there's some really interesting things. And again, if you're following along on that other link, we're on slide 54 here. Some pretty interesting things have happened. So around kind of during COVID, when there was a lot of work from home, we saw a lot of programs really try to open up their channels to get more stakeholders involved. Your stakeholders are not just your owners. Your stakeholders are not just your managers and your employees. Stakeholder technically is anybody who has a vested interest in your organization. So that extends out to spouses and significant others of your employees. It extends out to vendors. And so we've seen some interesting moves here. So employees still account for about 40% of reporter types. But if you look at the next bar up, there's been a pretty significant increase in customers and related parties. So again, if we don't care where the risk intelligence is coming from, and we're open to getting risk intelligence from more sources, there's really a lot of it there. Like there's orders of magnitude more risk. Like, let's just start with this. There's orders of magnitude more risk intelligence in your organization than you're getting. It's just true across every single business. People are 6 to 8 times more likely to go to their manager with an issue than they are to use our third-party channels that are in place. So doing some quick algebra there, it's not like it's 1 or 4 or even 8 reports per 100 available within the organization. It's closer to 40, 50, 60 reports available before we even start considering the fact that multiple witnesses of a specific event can also generate, duplicate reports. So we're really only scratching the surface here. So that's been a pretty significant increase, from 2020 at 36% up to 46%. It's like a 10-point jump, just doing some quick math here. But let's dive into actually, let's jump to the next slide here. I just want to keep going. So Leslie, I'm going to walk through this, and if you have any other takeaways here, I'd love for you to jump in. But breaking down the numbers on this infographic, you're going to see a couple of interesting things. And again, some of these infographics and some of these cuts of the data we're doing in aggregate can also be applied to your particular program. So I want to focus in on the bottom section of this report, which is what percentage of the reporter types are submitting issues within these categories. And you're going to see some things that I think are interesting and some things that you might come to expect. So of course, for HR, over 90% of those are employee-based issues. But what I think is interesting is this 83% here. Okay, so this is customer, related parties, and business quality. So when we can, in our minds, recognize that compliance is quality, quality leads to better patient care, well, then we should be looking for opportunities on how we can add value to the business. Of course, we can add value to the business by just de-risking it and stamping out a risk, right? Well, of course, we can add value by training the workforce and making sure our policies are dialed in. But again, we also have these channels in place, and we, as a circulatory system of the organization, should have relationships at all the different organs of the body. So when we can, with our insights, provide some instruction or provide some data with respect to business quality, in many cases, we can really reframe our role within the organization, not as just like the police or not as just the like de-risker of the organization, but really as the value adder to our company. Anything else to add here?
Yeah, I would just say I think this is a very interesting data point. I do believe that one of the things I've been saying for years is that patients are way more educated about what they need to know and their rights in a lot of regulatory areas in healthcare. And so this number doesn't surprise me. And I think a lot of compliance programs need to pay attention more. Don't let those numbers just sit in the patient satisfaction department. Figure out how it ties directly to your program and how you can improve some quality and intersected compliance education areas as well in the way you're providing education. So I just expect to see this number to grow. Patients have more information and more access to it.
Yeah, and they're a great, they're a great stakeholder group to get some more of that risk intelligence.
Absolutely.
I'd like to jump down to reporter awareness here. This is going to be slide 57 if you're following along at home. But reporter awareness showed some interesting trends over the last few years. Okay, so this is something that we ask. I think this is a good thing to check because we, at some level, we're marketers, right? We are influencers of the culture within our organization. So we put out this content and we have these different ways that we try to activate these human sensors in our organization, and getting some feedback loop on which of these resources or which of these awareness initiatives are really gaining the most traction can help us to not spend time on things that aren't moving the needle and really double down on the things that are most important. So what you'll see is that, when we first started doing this back in the day, this bottom layer was not the biggest layer. This is internet now. So it used to, way back in the day, it was always posters. Posters was the biggest one. Now it's internet. So if you don't have a portal set up where someone can Google, Acme Healthcare Ethics, and that pops up exactly the information they need, you're probably leaving some engagement on the table. So it's super important that, you're really maximizing your impact across these channels. Printed materials, that used to be up at 20%. It's been kind of 20%, in 2020. Again, it was much higher in the past, 20% in kind of 2020, 2021, or 2020 and 2022. And we've seen about a 5-point drop in that during 2024. So if you're really overly relying, or if someone was to ask you to describe, your awareness channel, and you say, I'm going all in on posters, that may work if you have a captive audience, if you have a captive stakeholder group that are always seeing these posters and you're rotating them and so forth. In today's day and age where the veil of attention is thicker than it's ever been, we really have to say things like marketing says 7 times 7 different ways. We have to come at this from different angles. So if we jump to the next slide, you can see some other kind of interesting things here. So printed materials ends up for healthcare or for health, finance, and support services to be kind of a non-issue. It's really not a needle mover at all. So if I was over in, health, finance, support services, I would be doubling down on internet, and I would really be doubling down on the word of mouth thing. The way to really drive the word of mouth thing, the best way to advertise for your restaurant is to just have a great restaurant that people are going to talk about it. People within your organization are talking all the time. And I guarantee you, when somebody speaks up about something, they've talked to their best friend, like their best friend who they eat lunch with every day. They know about that way before you do. So when they have a crappy experience of waiting on the phone and listening to Muzak for 10 minutes before getting rushed off the phone, well, they're going to convey that as well. And word is going to spread. Interestingly, about 20-ish% is all word of mouth. So if we're not focusing on really trying to maximize and optimize the word of mouth factor, I think we're leaving a lot of engagement and a lot of effectiveness on the table. Anything else kind of jump out at you here, Leslie?
It makes me sad to see the training and orientation percentages down so low, but because I think there's so much benefit to in-person and providing it and seeing body language and ensuring everyone understands. But of course, that's the way of the world is changing. So, but yes, if you do have effectiveness in that, I say keep that up. That's a great way to measure understanding and comprehension, even though the numbers are lower.
But, to that point, I mean, it just kind of is what it is, right? If we're overly relying, if we're like, hey, yeah, I'm good on my awareness. Like I'm doing my due diligence. Every year we do a training. At the end of the training, I flash that number up there. I should be fine. Well, that's not driving behavior. Okay. So of course we need to have our trainings. Of course we want to sprinkle some stuff in there, but again, we can't overly rely on any one of these channels. Just like Coca-Cola doesn't overly rely on billboards. They do everything, right? They do commercials and they do billboards and they do ads on Twitter and they do ads all over the place. We have to, again, stack the deck in our favor. I want to skip through issue sequence. I actually just want to, for the last 15 minutes here, I'd love to jump down to slide 73. And I want to talk about these two concepts that I think are super critical. And I think we'd be remiss to pave over them. And so one is the kind of the middle manager thing. And the other is the retaliation thing. So Joa, if you can jump down to the missing link slide, please. And for those of you following along at home, I'll tell you in 1 second what number that is. But let's start talking a little bit about this missing link. This is slide 71, I believe. Yeah, slide 71. So I briefly mentioned this before, but people are 6 to 8 times more likely to talk to a middle manager than they are to engage in the reporting channel. We know 42% of workplace misconduct, at least, I think that's a wildly low number because this is a self-reported number, okay? But 42%, almost half, goes unreported. So Leslie, when you're thinking about this lost opportunity that many of us really haven't activated yet in middle managers, what are some things that kind of come to mind here?
Yeah, so I actually was a middle manager, and one of the things that the compliance officers that I worked for as a middle manager, what they did is they promoted our expertise, and that promoted our door as being open just in the same way hers was or his was. And I think that's a really important part that a lot of organizations miss. We always point to the chief compliance officer. That works in environments where there's only the chief compliance officer. But if you have a team and a staff full of middle managers, not only does it encourage reporting to you, but it also encourages in the opposite direction, right? Where you're saying, hey, talking to middle managers, they have the expertise, they have the knowledge. I don't have to go to what sometimes people perceive as these big, scary titles, vice president, senior vice president, and oftentimes that alone is an intimidation factor that doesn't allow people to speak up. They like the title just manager or analyst, and they feel comfortable talking to them. And so I think promoting that across the board, both in the compliance departments and outside of the compliance departments, is equally as important. I will tell you from a risk assessment standpoint, middle managers should be your first point of contact. I'd say that because a lot of times vice presidents, those levels, they're under the understanding or the assumption that something is happening, but most of the time it's not. And when you talk to those frontline folks and middle manager folks, you'll see a different picture, maybe not a negative picture, but a different picture of what is going on in the risk that is identifying. So I'm a huge advocate of middle managers, and I think that entire layer is oftentimes overlooked way too much.
Yeah, it is overlooked. And I think sometimes it feels like an insurmountable task in some ways. How do I get all these middle managers sort of singing from the same song sheet? We have a really cool toolkit that we're working on pushing out this quarter. We've gotten famous for these toolkits that we push out, but it's going to be sort of a relaunch toolkit for your Speak Up program. And, we have a middle manager toolkit from last year, which if you've not checked out, maybe we can drop that into the chat and people can download that for free. There's dozens of resources and stuff in there, but we're going to be doing kind of a similar kind of extension of that in the context of really trying to drive that Speak Up forward. Lance said something in the chat here. He said, why it's so important to connect with middle managers like Leslie. I was one and know what it's like. We also encourage employees to speak up to their managers. Sometimes that works. So again, we want to try to build a bridge across this chasm from both angles. Yes, I want, yes, I want people to feel comfortable speaking up to their managers, but I also want managers kind of pulling those in. I want people I want individual stakeholders pushing reports into the organization, but I also want to activate the middle managers to pull those reports into the organization. When we can build that bridge from both sides, the odds of it connecting is going to be a lot higher. And it's really a lot easier to activate these folks than you think. This thing that's coming out, it's going to have a training deck for those guys. It's going to have a bunch of things that they can say in their weekly meetings to reinforce this desire that the organization has to build a culture of integrity, to give them the information, to make sure that they get the right information when they're getting something, to drop it into the central risk brain which is what we're talking about, our internal case management system. We just dropped that into the chat, so check that out if you have not seen that yet. But this is the game. Somebody was talking about tone at the top, critical. Buzz at the bottom. Okay, fine, great. That's super critical. But the missing link, the missing gap here is on the middle manager piece. And when we can turn this on, look, most people who made it to middle management, they're probably upstanding people, right? They're highly conscientious people. They're highly competent people. They care about progress and success and so forth. So it's not like they're like, yeah, I don't want to hear about it. Many times those people are functioning in a point of ignorance as well. So again, a little bit of a push can really get those birdies out of the nest, spreading their wings and flying. Okay, this last thing here, I'm telling you, again, let's jump down to 5 ways to fight retaliation. This, I just think if we can attack the middle manager thing and we can attack head on the elephant in the room, which is the retaliation thing, we can really supercharge the trust in the organization. And that's the impediment. That's what stops people from engaging with our program. So Joa, if you can jump down to the 5 ways to fight. So if you're following along at home, this is slide 73. So let me just frame out something for you. ECI came out with a report a year or two ago. Joe, if you can screen share this last slide, 73 here, that would be great. ECI came out with a report a couple years ago, and the findings were kind of, reiterated in their most recent report, which said over 50% of people who spoke up faced actual retribution. So retribution, retaliation, unfortunately, is not objective. It is subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder. So if somebody thinks they were retaliated against, they are going to act as if they were actually retaliated against. And when you think about the negativity bias that all people have, when you think about the natural impediment for speaking up, which is someone scared of losing their job or whatever, the odds of us looking for, if you speak up, you're going to be more sensitive to things that you might perceive as retaliation. So there's a lot we can do, because we are not just paper pushers. We are not just box checkers. We are arbiters of our culture. We are influencers of our culture of integrity. There's a lot we can do with those reports and with our follow-up, with those reports and with that follow-up to, kind of head this retaliation off at the pass. A lot of us have, zero retaliation policies. Okay, that's great. That's a great sort of aspirational thing. But to the extent that retaliation is happening, or people perceive retaliation to be happening, that kind of flies in the face of this policy that's in place. So what are some things that we can do to fight this retaliation problem? I know this is a concept that's, this topic is near and dear to your heart, Leslie. So why don't you walk us through some of these ways that we can fight retaliation?
Yeah, so these are some really great ways. I like this idea that you should just assume that you have a problem, because most people do, whether you want to admit it or not.
Right.
Using that you have the right protections are in place and making sure that you follow up with actual reporters in a reasonable time frame, and even putting some benchmarks on their 30, 60, 90s to check to see if any retaliation has happened is really, really important. And I'll say this. Employees watch everything. You think they're only watching their departments. They watch system-wide, everything that you do. And if you have a zero retaliation policy and you've never audited against that, that's your first mistake. Secondary to that, the other thing is, if you have disciplinary actions in place that are supposed to apply across the healthcare system-wide, but if the physician, your top physician of your hospital, makes, has some negative behavior, you don't terminate them, but you terminate the medical assistant. Right. Or the environmental worker. You have a huge issue there. And employees are watching that, and they won't speak up if you have this sort of mentality or this sort of environment or atmosphere. And so what I would recommend that all of us do is actually audit that policy, audit against it, and not just from a compliance standpoint. Look at it from an HR standpoint. What terminable offenses do we have? What language do we have in our policy language, especially as it relates to things like privacy violations in your organization? And same thing, when you're looking at more complex issues, maybe they're along coding compliance or Stark or anti-kickback. Are you being consistent with them across the board is a great way to really evaluate your retaliation environment.
Well, to your point, people see everything. They're, everyone is like kids. You like your kids will see everything, and they're going to interpret things. You know what I mean? And so, the thing I tell people is, like, it should be part of your process that when you're talking to somebody, even if it's an anonymous, and you're able to communicate through your tool, through email or something like that, this should be like, we should be talking about retaliation all the time. We should be talking about it at every turn, every opportunity we get. We build, think about, if there's an elephant in the room, and I'm not talking about the elephant in the room, it's hard to take me really that serious, right? If that's the elephant in the room in the context of our investigation, it's the fear of retaliation. So assume that it's an issue, assume somebody's scared about it, and hit it head on and say, hey, we really care about retaliation here. We don't want that to happen. If you feel that at all throughout this process or after this is concluded, I don't know what this investigation is going to result in. We have to do the investigation, but if at any point throughout this you're feeling retaliated, here's my email. You can reach out to us at any time. We want to stamp that out. Okay. Setting the stage and doing that persuasion, as I call it, on the front end when we're starting to engage with those upstanders who have raised their hand to share some speak up information, can do a lot to frame out our heart and convey our heart for them and for the culture of integrity that we're trying to build, and really starts to set the stage for us trying to attack that. When that person who has been scared to report because they don't want to get retaliated against has that fear addressed in the first interaction, that does a lot to like lower the anxiety, and that does a lot, that increases the odds that they say, man, I was so, to their friend at lunch, man, I was so nervous about speaking up, but they seem really like psychotic about like stamping out retaliation. I feel so much better about it. That's the kind of conversation I want going on to really kind of spread that word of mouth. So that's an easy thing on the front end. Setting a task in your corrective action plan that says on day 30, I need a reminder, or on day 45, I need a reminder to follow up with this person just to ensure that they haven't experienced any retaliation, is another way that that we can, quote unquote, prove our commitment to building this culture of integrity. Anything else you would add here, Leslie?
Yeah, there's a couple of comments in the chat about how do you work with HR when they're reluctant to give you this information. Listen, look, I think retaliation should be one of those audit work plan items that should be on there every year. We have work plan items on there that are just run of the mill, redundant. They're not useful in identifying risks. It's just a part of the 7 elements. It produces the same positive outcome every year. Take that off and replace it with retaliation, and also use data to support why that's so important. That'll help sort of speak to the necessity of a audit like that.
All right. Well, we are kind of right at time here. Let's get one more emoji explosion for the one and only Leslie. Everything you touch just turns to gold, Leslie. So appreciate that. It's crazy. Right as Leslie started talking, the slides started working. So I'm glad we got the slides to work on the last for the last slide of the whole presentation here. But hope you guys found some value in this, and I hope that you feel energized and you feel motivated to climb this mountain that we're all trying to scale here. There's absolutely something, the work you do is critical. The work you do is important. We have the weight of the world on our shoulders. None of us have the resources we want. None of us have, all the tools that, we wish that we had, i.e. a magic wand to fix all this stuff. So it's on us to really be the architect of our destiny. It's on us to exhibit that high agency and direct our own and our team's efforts towards the things that are going to move the needles the most. Don't get overwhelmed by this. Don't get overwhelmed by what gap you might have from what you might see here or what your friend's program is doing. This is let's not get caught into the Instagram effect here. Okay. We are where we're at. You are where you're at. There's something you can do to push the ball forward. There's some little steps you can take to start to optimize your system, but it's going to take you breaking out of the status quo. It's going to take you focusing, lifting your eyes up from your feet and looking at the next summit that you're climbing toward, and really thinking about, how can I just make one step forward? How can I make one little improvement here? And I think that kind of a mode is very freeing. I think that mode deletes, any mundanity. I don't know what the word is, but sometimes our job can be mundane. It's a lot more exciting to drive improvement. And there's so much improvement for us to have here. So if you can't tell, I am so excited about this next decade. I think it's going to look way different. I think, we'll look back on the olden days when we were the office of no, where now we have a seat at the table and we're the strategic advisor to the organization. And we have, especially in healthcare, we have this massively unique opportunity to really overlay our goals with the goals of the organization, knowing that our stakeholders are all kind of acclimated toward leaving the world better, making the world a better place, driving better patient care. So the time is now for us to keep moving. This Thursday, we have another great episode. Leslie, love you so much. You're phenomenal. Follow Leslie on LinkedIn. She did not ask me to do this. Maybe you want to drop off. Anytime you can work with her, I would encourage it. Anytime you can show up at any, conference that she's at talking, she always drops gems like this. So, love you all. We'll see you next Thursday. Take care.
Thank you.